You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Since its inception, Amazon Web Services, AWS, has been the best place for customers to build and run open source software in the cloud. AWS is proud to support open source projects, foundations, and partners.
We are back at KubeCon North America, and this time our guest is Mike Stefanik, Senior Manager of Product Management at AWS.
Yeah.
Mike, thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Now, what do you all manage?
Yeah, that's a lot of managers in one title. So I manage product for EKS, our managed Kubernetes service at AWS, as well as ECR, or Elastic Container Registry at AWS. ECR I like to think of as more the unsung hero, the backbone. It's handling billions of image pulls a day. It's built on the Open Container Initiative spec, so you can think of it as a managed open source product as well. EKS, of course, gets more of the buzz and the airtime. It's our managed Kubernetes service that we launched in 2018, so 8 years old now. We've evolved it quite a bit from when we first launched to just a managed Kubernetes control plane, and now we take on a lot more of the heavy lifting of things people are doing in the cluster, add-ons, worker nodes. So we've evolved quite a bit since we launched.
Yeah, and what's evolved too is the way people use EKS, I think, right? Especially in this age of AI. Talk about that a little bit. How has that changed, and also how has it changed how you're thinking about building?
Yeah, in the early days of EKS, it was very much a product targeted towards the early adopters of Kubernetes. They only wanted the managed Kubernetes control plane, and they wanted to do everything else themselves. That has shifted over time, where we're starting to get into more the late majority, even the laggards. People come into Kubernetes, they don't have massive platform teams, they don't want to manage every single thing themselves, and so we're evolving our product to be easier to use rather than just a enterprise, just the managed control plane, I want to do everything else myself. So in terms of agentic workloads, things like an MCP server for EKS, we open sourced several months ago. We want to make that into more of a managed thing to make it more enterprise ready, but generally making our service able to communicate and be compatible with these various agentic tools that are out there. So if you go ask a LLM, hey, I just want to run a simple Kubernetes workload, it's going to know how to talk to EKS and run that.
Yeah, because what's also changed then is how people want to consume the service, right? You manage the MCP server. Are you seeing a lot of uptick there? Is that something people are using? So for
now, it's an AWS Labs project. We put it out there. We just wanted to get feedback on it. Some of the early feedback that I've found interesting is the actual tool names that you're putting in your MCP server matter quite a bit, where you don't just necessarily want to copy every API call that EKS has, because the LLM can figure that out itself. Yeah. But troubleshooting, runbooks, how to deploy CloudFormation stacks to actually run a full application, that's much more interesting that we put in our MCP server than just create cluster, deploy pod. So we've evolved the tool names we launched with quite a bit, and now we're working on managing it to make it more enterprise ready.
It's actually kind of abstracting more with the MCP service, that's right?
Exactly. If you're more explicit, it's generally unnecessary, because we found that LLMs can pretty much figure that out on their own. Yeah. And like AWS has a documentation MCP server and an API MCP server, and they're going to go use that. But in order to actually do more complex tasks as an agent with EKS, that's where our MCP server can be more useful.
Interesting. Yeah, I keep hearing that more and more, that the LLMs can just figure out the APIs anyway. So sometimes it's not.
The one really. So we launched not just the MCP server, but we launched a hosted knowledge base as well. And that's been the most useful piece we've heard from our users so far, is that when we keep our knowledge base up to date with new launches and features and documentation, that's been really, really valuable. So it's recommending the newest stuff we launched versus something from a year ago that maybe we don't think is the best practice anymore.
Knowledge base that then gets pulled into like QDeveloper or something like that?
Exactly. So the knowledge base can include both public knowledge, but also if you think about we have thousands and thousands of support cases over the years.
Yeah.
We've seen every possible way that a node can fail, that a cluster can fail, whether it's something that happened on our side or something, an action a customer took, as well as internal logs, metrics that aren't necessarily exposed that a support team might have access to. If we can bundle all that into an agent and our MCP server the customers use, they can do more themselves without having to open a support case. They figure out more on their own. So it's a win for us, it's less cases, it's a win for customers. They can solve problems troubleshooting more quickly.
Yeah, and you can focus on the new interesting problems that come up.
Exactly.
Well, talking about new and interesting, so one of the topics here at KubeCon for sure is building AI products on top of Kubernetes.
Yep.
Now EKS, I'm sure you're seeing a lot of that as well.
Yeah, agentic AI to use the buzzword. We're seeing
It's actually, do you see a lot of agentic AI or do you see more other use cases?
I would say agentic AI is more the frontier, more traditional inferencing LLMs where you might be building a more reactive app is much more prominent. We're seeing on EKS. I'd say we're very much in the early days of agentic AI, which I would define as agents that are taking proactive tasks, making decisions, pursuing a goal, calling out to tools, extensions, all to get a job done, and they're much more fine-grained compared to like a broad LLM. So I'd say it's early days, but we're starting to see more and more customers. It's experimental, but we're starting to see them experiment with running agentic workloads on Kubernetes and on EKS.
What are you seeing there? How are they building that? What are some of the architectures you're seeing there?
Yeah, I would say Kubernetes, the same reasons why Kubernetes became a good target for more traditional LLM workloads, agentic workloads need dynamic resource allocation, being able to use fine-grained slices of CPUs and GPUs, complex communication, they're talking to each other quite a bit, and just a standardized interface that you've already standardized for ML, for traditional workloads. It just makes a lot of sense to move that into a Kubernetes world.
Sure.
So how you go and deploy that, there's the same things you need to think about in traditional workloads: security, observability, deployment, communication. You need to think about all that. The big choice that I would say an early user of running agentic workloads on Kubernetes needs to think about is, where are you going to deploy the model? Because the agent itself is just a simple, you can write it in Python, you use a SDK like Strands that AWS open sourced. That's generally a simple container you're running, it just needs CPU resources. Where you deploy the model is one of the first decisions you're going to make. Are you going to use OpenAI directly in their hosting service? Are you going to use a service like Bedrock at Amazon, which has Anthropic and OpenAI models? Or are you going to run the model directly in Kubernetes itself? That's one of the first decisions we're going to make. I'd say experimenting, it's generally easier to just call out to some endpoint that they're doing the heavy lifting of GPU calculations. But we are seeing some customers, if they want to cost optimize, they may try to run the model within the cluster itself.
What are you seeing there how do people make those choices then in production? What are they looking at?
Yeah, cost is the biggest one.
Sure.
Cost.
Tokens are expensive.
GPUs are not cheap. The model that these providers have of tokens, so cost is easily the biggest deciding factor that I've seen so far on where people want to run. So observability becomes important. When you're observing agentic workloads, you're not just observing traditional infrastructure, CPU, memory, networking. While that's important, you're going to scale on different metrics that, the tokens coming in, an agent in a GPU workload is going to scale on the number of requests and tokens coming in versus other traditional metrics. So having the right observability is probably the second most important thing that I've seen. Actually, security, all the usual suspects are there.
Yeah, they don't go away just because now there's an LLM in the mix.
Exactly.
So maybe they become even more important, I would argue.
I would think so, yeah.
Just to go back to the discussion of when should I even use EKS over like an Bedrock agents, for example, because you've got multiple tools there too. Sure,
I would say, Agent Core is part of Bedrock at AWS. that's going to be the more managed experience. If you're just getting started and you want the simplest possible way to deploy an agent, go use Agent Core. A lot of customers we talk to at EKS, they've standardized on Kubernetes for their compute. And just like, 7 years ago, was anybody thinking about running AI workloads on Kubernetes? Was it built for that use case? No. But was Kubernetes very well designed to be extensible to handle additional use cases? Yes. And so they've standardized, right, their observability tools, their monitoring, their security, their governance. They've already standardized that on Kubernetes. They don't necessarily want to go run in production with some other tool, and so they're gonna, for now it's more work, for sure. There's more you're doing yourself. We have documentation and guidance, but if you're that type of customer who just wants to standardize on a single compute platform, and you've already made that choice in Kubernetes, you're gonna figure out how to run agents in Kubernetes as well.
Yeah, and as you said, actually setting up, kind of working with the agent frameworks, whichever you choose, isn't all that difficult at the end of the day.
It's really not. Like, if you go and look at examples of how to run your first agent and go, strands or LangChain or something, it's give me the endpoint for my model, whether that's running in the cluster or some other thing. Give me the system prompt. So tell the agent to define the agent what it's going to do. You can say, I'm a travel booking agent, or I'm a Kubernetes troubleshooting agent that needs to figure out what's going wrong in the cluster, and then some other settings, maybe the metrics you want to expose, the CPU, memory, GPU if you're running the model locally, and that's it. It's pretty simple to define an agent. Like, it sounds abstract, but if you actually go look at real examples, there's not much to it.
No, it's more like the prompts are probably the harder part than anything else, I think, right?
Yes.
Now, you did mention security and guardrails and all of that. Like, what are you seeing there what works and what doesn't work, how people approach this?
Yeah, you have to think of security throughout the entire stack. And you need more because agents can do anything, you need more fine-grained controls. So an example where AWS is innovating in the open source to help here, we actually just recently introduced a KEP to Kubernetes for more fine-grained conditional authorization. Because as we see it today, the Kubernetes authorization model really isn't fine-grained enough to secure some of these things that agents can do. So we open sourced a framework a year ago called Cedar, which we believe provides that more fine-grained authorization control. We have a KEP now to integrate that into Kubernetes. And for example, you could say something like, only allow this principal to update this resource if it doesn't modify some secret associated with it. Whereas before you might have to say, okay, the resource itself I have to give permissions or not. Now you can very specifically say this agent can modify just this specific parameter and not other ones. So we see that as a gap right now in the Kubernetes space, and that's an area we're actively contributing. But it is up and down the stack. You need to think about security from the containers, which models are your developers allowed to use? Is it fine-tuned on just your company's data? Is it public data? Like, thinking from that down to the traditional deployment methods in the cluster itself. Network policies, for example, become more important because agents are communicating with each other. You want to say this agent can talk to that one, but not this other one. Authorization policies, it all becomes more important, and because you can have lots of agents doing different things, you really need that fine-grained level of security.
Yeah, I can imagine. Are you seeing any common mistakes that people make when they're setting up these systems?
Yes. Having a human in the loop still right now is the best approach. So troubleshooting cases, for example, let the agent figure it out. Give a suggestion. If you're going so far as to just let the agent try to fix it itself, that's further than most people are. So I would say that's a mistake unless you're really, really confident. I see a lot of customers that'll have a Slack channel for troubleshooting, and the agent gives a suggestion, here's how far I got, then the human takes over. I have yet to see the case yet that successfully where agents are fully autonomous from troubleshooting to actually taking the remediation actions. So that's one. Setting up systems themselves, deploying agents. If you are running the model in the cluster, just running it as a normal deployment is generally not good enough. You're going to need to put something like VLLM in front of it, which is going to handle batching and make sure the GPU is utilized more consistently. If you have more complex workflows and orchestrations, that's where you might need to pull in something like Kubeflow has one called K-Gateway, which allows, it'll surface the observability metrics. If you're running multiple models, it'll route to the correct one. So if you are doing more complex workflows, like just using kubeproxy for inter-agent communication generally isn't good enough. You're going to need to use a tool that can do something more sophisticated.
Yeah. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing there's a bunch of these agent gateways, right?
Yeah, there's a bunch popping up. I think K-Agent, K-Gateway. Again, it's early. We have customers asking about them. They're experimenting with them. Large-scale production workloads, early days, I would say.
Yeah. Are you seeing, where are your customers right now? Because I'm getting mixed messages there sometimes.
So the biggest, I'd say there's two different main types of use cases, right? The prototypical EKS customer is a platform team, operations team, SRE team. They are using AI themselves to troubleshoot problems when issues arise, to give their developers tools to go faster to define their applications. I've heard a lot of customers, like developer portals were a big thing in the last few years. I've heard some of the more bleeding edge EKS customers saying developer portals are still there, but a lot of it is shifting left into the IDE itself, and we're giving some of the tools that we used to give our developers in the developer portal. Now we're just building plugins in the IDE that they're using directly, and so that's a change that I've seen be successful in some of our more advanced customers. When you talk about the developers at these customers building the end user applications at these companies, if it's a travel booking company or something, that I don't have quite as much visibility into. I get the sense those are still earlier. For the internal platforms, they're more willing to be bleeding edge because it's internal. For customer-facing applications, the bar is higher and there's a lot more caution there.
Yeah. What about multi-agent systems? Feels like really early.
Yeah, early again, I would say. There's the A2A protocol for communicating between them and figuring out which tasks are going to be done. Internally, I've used deep research tools that we have that I know are multi-agent systems, going out and figuring in a bunch of things, getting me back a really, really long report. So that's a use case I've seen for research. An actual multi-agent system that's gonna book your travel in your hotel and figure out the pool cabana. Like, I don't know, that's a little ways off. Certainly, like, when I was just talking to a bunch of customers last night. They're all talking about hackathons that they've done. So many ideas floating around. It's super, super exciting times internally, but production deployments are, I think 2026 will be the year of production deployments for agentic workloads, whereas 2025 was more traditional LLM inferencing and experimenting with agentic workloads.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Now, if I want to get started with building an agent on EKS today, what do I do? Where do I?
So we have an AI on EKS. If you just search that, it's a whole repo of examples, documentation. I would recommend the Strands SDK, which is a project that AWS open sourced. It's really, really simple to write an agent in Python. There's projects out there, I think Cube Agentic, that makes it really easy in a CRD to just run that agent. I would not recommend trying to run the LLM in your cluster itself. Get an OpenAI key, use Bedrock, do something like that to actually host the LLM externally. And I think you'd be surprised at how easy it is to actually get started, and quite fun, honestly, to define an agent that can do something. As a fun exercise, you could say, I'm a Kubernetes troubleshooting agent, run it inside your cluster, and then intentionally crash loop back off a pod, right? To have it pull a non-existent image and see if your agent can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, have you tried that? Does it work?
I have, it works, and it's quite fun when the thing just goes and looks at logs and metrics, and it's like, it looks like this image doesn't exist, there's a typo, go fix it.
How much agentic tools do you, I don't know if you can talk about it, but internally, how much are you using these
So,
technologies?
If you had asked me 6 months ago, I would say not much. In the last 6 months, I honestly feel like I'm working more efficiently with some of these tools. Some of the really helpful use cases I've been using internally, BI. So I used to have to go figure out SQL tables and SQL queries to go figure out what's going on with our customers and understand how they're using our service to make decisions. We have a BI agent that can now understand our tables, and like I can ask it questions that I've been wondering answers to for years, honestly. And it just goes and figures it out for me based on the data that's already there. So that's been a real concrete use case internally that I've seen speed up the product development process for us.
Yeah, and I'm sure that your developers are all using.
Oh yeah, our developers
Qdeveloper,
are using their own internal tools for sure, and we monitor that. But I've been surprised in the product management role how well some of that and my team has been able to use these tools in the last 3 to 6 months.
What do you think is going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months? And
the tools are going to get better. I mean, internally, we're rolling out new versions of agents, new tools, research tools. Quick Suite is a new product that AWS or kind of relaunched several months ago, and it's honestly gone viral internally. We have
also BI-centric, right?
What's that?
It's BI-centric,
yeah,
right?
It's very much like it's BI-centric, but it also you can put in all the documents that your team has written as a repository, customer notes. We have a public roadmap. I can pull in issues from that. So it becomes this central repository of information that an LLM and an agent can be optimized for. So I've built internally using Quick Suite, the EKS product management Quick Suite space that is optimized, and it looks at all of our docs and our BI dashboards and our customer feedback, and I can ask it a question like, hey, going into 2026, what are some of the top customer pain points that we're seeing? What do you think is the most bang for our buck to go build? And it's honestly quite impressive.
I'm sure
how well it can parse all of that information and provide valuable insights.
Well, we're only a few weeks away from AWS reInvent in Vegas, so I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about.
Lots of exciting times. I'm going to leave this interview and go make sure things are on track.
I'm sure it's busy time.
So yeah,
for
very,
you.
very busy, but exciting times.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.